Welcome to the Rascanu Show. Today we have the pleasure of having a conversation with Daniel Steinfeld, who has a lot of experience in the real estate industry in the Toronto area. He started as a realtor. Now he is owner of a brokerage in the Toronto area that's based in Vaughan. He also happens to serve on the Toronto Real Estate Association's board currently as a board member. And him and his wife have a popular podcast in the real estate space, which you may want to listen to. And it was a pleasure to bump into him at the recent TREB event. I thought it'd be worth having a conversation about what TREB is from the perspective of someone who is looking at buying or selling real estate in the Toronto area, and just getting a bit of a better understanding of his journey in real estate and some of the things that might be helpful for the broader audience to be aware of. All right. Well, Daniel, thank you for making the time. Let's start with why. Why did you get involved in real estate, and how did you end up getting to where you're at right now?
Well, thanks for having me. First of all, happy to be here. Well, I got started in real estate. It's I guess maybe a third career for me. I started initially in finance out of school, working for a firm called PricewaterhouseCoopers. Worked there for a bit and actually spent the bulk of my career working for the Toronto Argonauts Football Club here in Toronto for about 10 years there. I was their CFO for 4 years and their VP sales for 4 or 5 years. Had a tremendous amount of experience there. Really cool stuff happened. And moving on from that, got into entrepreneurship where I was a consultant for the same sorts of sports teams. The Argos became one of my clients after that. But fast forward, my wife, who you mentioned, she's been in real estate for about a dozen years now. She was in it just before I was. And when we were on the cusp of expecting our fourth child, it kind of dawned on me that she might, well, it dawned on me, but it wasn't the right answer, but it dawned on me that she might actually need some help dealing with clients and things like that. With so many kids in the house, maybe it would be helpful to have a license. So initially it was something that I thought would be a nice, I guess, sidestep from the work that I was doing. But being as driven as she is, when I did get my license and I said, "Hey, do you have some clients for me?" She said, "Go screw yourself, get your own clients." So it sort of threw me in the deep
Tough
end from
love.
day one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good though. It spoke to her character as being as driven as she is, and so I sort of dove in headfirst to my own business. Really enjoyed the nature of the industry. I already had a great a great interest in dealing with people, relationship building. It was a natural fit, and the rest is history. It sort of took off from there, and the two of us very shortly thereafter decided to go into business together, branch off, and start something pretty cool in the industry.
On the block.
That's right, yeah. So we started
Yeah.
on the block, and I guess would have been now about 7 years ago in 20 end of 2016.
Mm-hmm. And after you started on the block, you've been growing it. You have your office in Vaughan, and you built a podcast that I find a lot of realtors listen to, and you made your way to serve on the board of TREB. How was that part of your journey? How did it work out that way?
I think it's all been part of a similar theme. Even when we started the brokerage, the reason we did that was just because we wanted to be able to impact the industry as a whole. It wasn't just about buying and selling homes, but it was about building on the successes and the good things in the industry, trying to establish innovations that weren't in place. And it's a lot easier to push your own narrative and to follow your values when you're running the show yourself. So it was a bit of a leap of faith because we actually left the brokerage that you're with right at home right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were both there. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
great brokerage, but a large brokerage. And we wanted to be a little bit more in the driver's seat. Similar concept to getting involved in organized real estate at the board level for both of us as well. TREB is the biggest real estate board in North America. It's very influential. And to be able to literally have a seat at the table, both to have an ear to the ground with what is happening in the industry, what's to come, as well as to be able to have a useful voice that can help impact change and push the industry in I guess what I would consider the right direction. Obviously, everyone has opinions, but to be able to have one of those opinions at the table was really important, and so that's why I ran initially and was lucky enough to get voted in.
You're so inspiring, and so is your wife Katie, right? I mean, it's funny. So the last Real Estate Council of Ontario, in the last election, we had John, the CEO of Right at Home, become elected, and Katie came in number two. And before that, she was also on the RECO board. It's quite fascinating. So two out of two from Right at Home, and someone who has been with Right at Home before. It's pretty cool. So that means that there's good campaign tactics that people acquire as they are part of such brokerages.
I guess so,
I
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's think about Toronto Real Estate um, Association, Real Estate Board. If we're thinking about the changes that have been occurring recently, there's new legislation coming through the pipeline. There's this second phase of TRESA that is coming through and is becoming um, is becoming enforceable as of December 1st, 2023. Are there any general thoughts that you have, and you may be sharing them just as an individual consumer? You might be looking at it from a broker who, who's part owner of your own real estate brokerage, or you might be looking at it from the perspective of someone who happens to be serving as a board member of TREB right now. Can you shed some light on some of the things that people should be aware of who are buying, selling real estate in the Toronto area with regards to this new TRESA second phase?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, it's a really good thing would be the overarch, and I mean that from a consumer perspective. The reason that TRESA exists, it stands for Trust in Real Estate Services Act, is what TRESA is. And so it really is built upon making sure that consumers understand that as an industry, we need to not just expect but earn the trust of the consumer. And the regulations that are being enhanced and in some cases, adjusted from the existing regulations that existed prior, they're all being put in place to just expand and make that trust more of a, I guess, a realistic uh, prospect for people to have. Um, all, if not most of the rules are built upon the ideas of transparency, clarity. I can talk a bit. I don't know if you've talked in past episodes about what the specific rules are, but there are quite a bit. They're all built to make the client experience stronger.
Mm,
Um, Things like the idea of clear definitions, something as simple as clear wording in the forms and in the rules that go out there, where there's not all this legal mumbo jumbo that in a lot of ways makes it more difficult for consumers to really understand what they're signing, what they're getting
yeah.
into. In some cases, it might make it more difficult for professionals to explain it effectively. The wording is now deliberately being put in very plain English for people. Um, the idea of taking away maybe some noise that there's been in how professionals in the industry connect with consumers. There used to be the idea of clients and customers, and a lot of gray area in what is what and what the responsibilities are. The rules were very clear, but being able to articulate that on a transaction to transaction basis was probably more complicated than it needed to be. And I think from a consumer's perspective, you either are someone's client or you're not. And that's what the new rules are reflecting. You're either a client or you're what's called self-represented, which effectively is what it sounds like. It means you're choosing to not work with a representative. Um, Also, the definitions behind what the relationship between a consumer and a realtor looks like is a lot clearer. What are my responsibilities to you? What are your expectations you should have? Your responsibilities to a real estate professional? It's all, again, plain English. And these are sort of the basics that form what TRESA, especially this phase, is all about.
Hmm. Thank you so much for shedding some light on that legislation. Now, if we think about the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board itself, where you are currently a board member, a lot of people come across TREB in articles online. Maybe they're reading the Globe or they're reading Toronto Star, National Post, whatever media they might be able to read in paper format and no longer, unfortunately, be able to read on social media. But what would you say are some of the things that the general public should be aware of who is buying, selling real estate in the Toronto area? What should they know about the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board that you think not a lot of people actually are aware of those things, some of the resources that it provides to the general public?
Well, I think resource is a really good word to use as a basis for what we're all about. Now, we are first and foremost, we're the board that represents and serves nearly 75,000 real estate brokers and salespeople in the GTA alone. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people know, I mean, maybe it's a bit of a joke to some people that you probably have several people living on your street, wherever you are right now, who are registered real estate agents or
Mm-hmm.
brokers. Um, but it's our job to really ensure that the professionalism and success of these members is maximized. That's what the goal is. And in doing that, it goes without saying that that doesn't happen without ensuring that the job that realtors do and the resource that we provide to consumers is as strong as can be imagined literally across the world.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal, first and foremost, is to ensure that we've provided enough resources to educate, to innovate, for our members, to give them the tools that put them in the best position to provide the top and best service for consumers. Um, from a consumer perspective, though, I think where they'd see a lot of TREB getting away from just the realtors with whom we or for whom we represent, they would see that we provide a lot of information to the general public.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether it's our president or CEO or just the reports we put out there in the media, data, statistics, reports, industry knowledge. That's a huge part of what TREB does. Like there is a real think tank and a whole wing to TREB that represents putting out their useful information that puts consumers and the industry, the media, and stakeholders in the best possible position to understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know as well as I do, no one has a crystal ball when it comes to what's next for, what's the price average going to be next month. However, we're very evidence based in everything that we do at the board level and through all the staff who work at TREB, and in being able to have access and use the amount of data and information available, because we do basically represent and put out there virtually every listing and sale that takes place in Southern Ontario, especially in
Mm-hmm.
the GTA. With that, it's a lot of data that can be leveraged to provide a lot of knowledge, expectation, forecasting, and especially backward looking data to help inform people's decisions about what they're going to do in real estate. So that's what a lot of people see, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
the statistics, the reports, things like that. But behind the scenes, there's a lot that we do as well. And I could keep ranting. I don't want to keep going. If you had another question
No,
you
I think
wanted
it's
to.
helpful. No, I think it's helpful to keep on going.
So one thing that I'm involved with personally is in advocacy and in government relations as well. So there's a big wing to TREB that is involved in speaking to and connecting with government at all levels, municipal, provincial, and federal. We were just talking before we went on the air. I spent the last few days in Ottawa on Parliament Hill, along with a lot of my colleagues from TREB and other organizations, effectively lobbying MPs about housing and about what is needed, what the crisis is, because we are the boots on the ground. And being a board member doesn't preclude me at all from what my actual role is, which is a realtor, working with my team, with my brokerage here, seeing what's happening, talking to consumers and understanding that, we see what the media talks about and the headlines and those kind of snippets and
Mm-hmm.
eye candy, clickbait. It's not that it's wrong, but really understanding what the crisis is and more so where it's headed is a big concern for the industry, and especially for what we try to get ahead of with talking to government about policy, about taxation issues, all sorts of things that could impact directly or indirectly housing, and making sure that it's available. And ultimately, affordability is what everybody talks about. I think for us, affordability is the goal, but
Mm.
accessibility before all else for people who can't even get into a home is really the overarching concept that we try to push, with affordability being the goal within that.
Hmm.
Um, so that's a lot of what we do as well on the government relations side of things.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah,
And so if you're thinking about affordability and accessibility, how do you think about that at on the block Realty? Are there certain resources that you provide that are perhaps more unique or that stand out as compared to other brokerages? I know that from the get-go, you pursued this initiative around allowing for auctions to occur, which is something that's a lot more common in other countries, like in Australia. Are you able to speak to that affordability, accessibility, how you view it at on the block Realty?
sure. And yeah, I think that example probably is the best when it comes to differentiation. Like, we did initially start this brokerage as a vehicle to help us try to implement this auction platform. So, transparency has always been a really big deal to us. I think when we were starting in the industry, and even now, people are familiar with bidding wars, they're familiar with blind bidding and the frustration that that can cause for people competing without really knowing what they're up against. Um, so we wanted to try to create an environment, or at least an option, for people to have a transparent negotiation with people. Um, the good news, fast forwarding to right now, another thing with the upcoming TRESA rules is that the ability for a seller to allow offers to be opened up and transparent is now in place. That hasn't been an option sellers have. And so we're really excited to see that. It's not explicitly saying auctions are a legal thing, but in theory they would be
Hmm.
under these rules. But what we put into place was basically building an environment that, again, gave consumers the choice on how they'd want to sell a home. Um, we're the first ones to admit that just because something's transparent, that does not correlate to affordability necessarily.
Hmm.
It does, though, correlate to an experience for a consumer that is more comfortable, that feels obviously less opaque by
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah.
When you know what you're up against, you can make more educated decisions. You can decide whether you're willing to or able to spend more or less, and you also don't overspend. So, from the
Yeah.
perspective of affordability, one byproduct of a blind bidding situation is when you don't know what you're up against, in theory, you could offer or spend more than you may have needed to on a property without knowing, because you don't know what you're up against. Now, that is still free market, and that's totally fine. If it's something you're willing to offer, then be happy if you win the property. But
Hmm.
it has left historically a bad taste in some people's mouth that they didn't know, did I pay too much?
Mm.
And so by introducing transparency and an open offer auction process, it really gave consumers the opportunity to go as high as they were willing to, while at the same time knowing I'm not overpaying.
Hmm.
And for sellers, it was a positive. And this was kind of a really interesting, I guess, side story to it, is that people initially thought, well, if it's to the benefit of buyers with transparency, it must be to the disadvantage of sellers, because by definition, if one wins, the other does not, right? Like, one's trying to get the highest price, one's trying to get the lowest. But what ended up happening is that it actually ensured more buyers were sticking around in the process, because the process was comfortable and they could see what they were doing. So where they otherwise would have tapped out or not gone to the highest number they were willing to, because they were comfortable with the transparency, it actually ensured the highest price for the seller was confidently achieved. More
Mm.
people stuck around. And to hear buyers who didn't win still be happy, might be the wrong word, because they wanted to buy the property, but comfortable that, listen, that's the best loss I've ever had, because at
Yeah.
least I know I went as high as I could have and I couldn't
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
So that's something that we introduced back in 2017. It was a great. It's still something that we offer now. We're about to be expanding the auction offering. So this is breaking news for you. It's when the new rules come out.
December
We're going to
1st.
become a little bit more mainstream,
Mm.
not with an on the block branded
Mm.
auction platform, but actually with a product that all brokerages and all agents can make use of to offer this
Mm.
um, to their client base. So this just
That's
in.
innovative. Looking forward to it.
It's breaking news. So yeah, I mean, we've got the back end. We're just kind of tweaking it. So it'll be a new brand. It's not going to be. We understand that we have actually had other agents use our platform, but if I was working for another brokerage, I'd be a little less. I'd have less of an appetite of wanting to send my clients to something branded with another brokerage to do an auction, right? So we're effectively going to create an environment where we're just kind of a third party, or that auction platform is a third party service that brokerages can use to offer
That's
this.
smart. I think that's great. Looking forward to testing that. Now, Daniel, I really appreciate your time. I know you're super busy. You have a lot on the go. If someone listening to this conversation wants to get in touch with you, connect with On the Block and your podcast and some of the other resources that you provide, how can they connect?
Sure. Connecting with me, I'm at Steinfeld Says is my handle on Instagram, Facebook. It might also be on LinkedIn. If not, just look up Daniel Steinfeld there. You'll find me. Our brokerage is On the Block Realty. At Get On the Block is our handle there. Lots of cool stuff we put up, and we're always happy to chat with anybody who wants to talk realtors or consumers. And our podcast, which is actually almost at its 200th episode. I think we're on 190 something right now. It's been every week for 4 years. It's called Level Up, the podcast for realtors. It's very focused on being a resource to the profession, to the industry. We started that before we started getting involved in organized real estate, and there was just a natural connection there to just trying to make the industry better. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts. Just look up Level Up or Level Up for Realtors. I'm sure there's lots of podcasts called Level Up. It's kind of a generic name, but you'll find us. And yeah, we try to load it with relevant, real talk content that isn't watered down. So yeah, we'd love if anybody, the general public is welcome to listen as well. Most of the stuff on there is very relevant to people who aren't just realtors, but definitely useful to people in the industry as well.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for your time. Daniel Steinfeld from On the Block Realty.
You.